Yeah, hopefully it goes well. We'll see what happens. So you're 59. Let's talk a little bit about your work now, because that's what I'm going to write about is your work. What I want to focus my story on is I want to write about your work, why it's great, and we've already talked about the reason stuff like that goes unpublished. I want to talk a little bit about like your efforts to get stuff published. I think you're a great writer. I think based on your output, you might strong argument you're the best living writer. So how is it that someone like how does a novel like Tumbleweeds or the Machete Brothers go unpublished?
It's just what I've been talking about.
Yeah, it's the same
The
thing.
people don't understand
But do
what
people read it? Did people read those books?
I mean. I'm people like you. Probably once or twice a year. I mean, I probably get a dozen or so people who will email me now. It used
Yeah.
to be a lot more, but I get a dozen people that will want to read stuff. So I'll maybe once a month I'll send it out to someone like you, and
Hmm.
maybe you might know someone, or you know someone who knows someone that might be
Yeah.
interested, who runs a small press or something. But I mean, Jessica and I have probably sent out our writings, and Jessica, I think, is the greatest female writer that's ever lived, at least in the English language.
I haven't read much of her, but I need to.
Yeah, but she, you know, you send them out, they're not interested. There was one, and sometimes you get these nasty, snarky kind of things. One guy Jessica always talks about was like, said something like, he gave the usual 3 or 4 paragraph bullshit, and then he wrote something like, that I was being arrogant by saying whatever book I had sent was a great book. But I quality, quantity, and diversity are the three things you need in great art. You need to get to a certain level of quality, but what happens with a lot of people who do that is they just repeat themselves. Imagine doing nothing but great love sonnets. If you've ever heard of a poet named Pablo Neruda from Peru, he wrote great love poems. Like most Latin Americans, his political poetry is absolute shit. Then you need quantity, because someone like Bruce Ariel, for example, wrote a lot of great poems, but he for every great poem he wrote 20 pieces of doggerel, which is bad poetry. If you've only got one or two things that are great in a long career, it's a dart toss.
Okay.
I'm not. You don't have to be a great dart thrower. That if you
Okay.
blindfolded me, spun me around 1,000 times, I'd still get a handful of center tosses or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
bullseyes. Um, and then after quality and quantity, you need diversity. You don't just want to write great poems that are love sonnets. You don't just want to write this form or that form, or just write angry young man beatnik type poetry. You don't. If you're
Mm.
writing a novel, for example, if I look through, if I just go back in my mind, I've written books that are portraits of individuals. I've written a Norwegian in the Family is almost 2.5 million words.
I haven't read that one yet, but
Yeah, the Vincetti Brothers is over 600,000 words, so it's significantly longer than War and Peace. Um,
yeah.
then and what I did in those two books, I had a thing called Total Immersion, where I
Hmm.
have these long dialogue scenes between characters that the characters are talking not necessarily about what they seem to be talking about, but they're talking around certain things.
Kind of like in a great film is the way, like, is what it reminds me of.
Yeah, like in a Cassavetes film, when
Yeah.
he's going for that realism. But now I don't really do much of that. For example, I, I did my last completed novel. I did a book on the actress, what's her name, Tallulah Bankhead. I don't know if from the 30s, 40s.
I
Before that,
don't
I
ring a
did a
bell.
book called a novel called Center of Mass, which I wanted to do a World War II novel. I have a number of great World War II scenes in Vincetti Brothers and Norwegian in the
And you have
Family.
some great sonnets too, war sonnets I've read. Uh,
Who, me?
and from your American sonnets,
Oh,
yeah.
well, yeah, and
The
so
MacArthur one, I think, was that. Was is
that's
that
not a
you?
sonnet. That's like a 3 page long poem. But
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That one, that one was really good.
but 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 anyway, what I was saying, diversity. You don't just want to keep repeating yourself. You have to keep churning. You have to, one of the, and here's another thing, a great point, everyone. One of the most valuable things in being a great artist is to forget, because if you have to remember the general principles of what makes this art or a particular art form great, but you don't want to remember the same things over and over again, because you don't want to be writing the same kind of novel over and over again. Before the Center of Mass that I did three or so novels ago was about the 40-year aftermath of people after World War II. Basically about not just post-traumatic stress disorder, but how everyone comes down from that, and how the war ruins lives years after they're going. Yeah. That's about a 350,000 word novel. It's a long novel. But in between them, I did a kid's book called Baby and Buddy. I have my orange cat, Kabiria. I call her Baby. And one night I see she's looking out the marble cubes that we have in our bathroom. She's seeing a little moth outside there. And she got obsessed with this moth. So I did this children's story about my cat and the moth. You don't want to repeat yourself. So you have to constantly change. And, have you ever read James Joyce's The Dead?
No.
So James Joyce is arguably...
That's a short story. Is that a short story?
Yeah, it's the last story in Dublin. And it's technically maybe just makes being a novella. But the end scene where snow keeps falling all over Ireland. This is what I say to people: is people who say,
"I've heard you say this." Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So but you have to keep the ideas coming. Just keep them coming and write them down. I mean, I could show you over. Well, where's the fucking desk?
Yeah. Let's see.
Okay, there. So you see folders there. They're all with ideas or lines or images or whatnot. Write this shit down. Don't throw things away. Learn to.
Here I got note cards. I write on note cards. I just write shit down.
Right.
I learned this. I guess it's basic, but David Lynch is the one who told me to write everything I think down on a note card.
Yeah,
at least in the interview.
Here I've got my post-its here with things from my main character in the book I'm working on now, Bob, to say or whatnot. And but too often there was a woman that I was once nearly involved with about 25 years ago, and she moved to another country, and yet some years ago, I stumbled upon, you Google up old friends from the neighborhood, people you worked with, or whatnot. And so I Googled her name, and she was writing, she did this video where she's saying she's going to write something about like a lesbian version of Moby Dick or something. And I'm like, oh God. and she's got on her wall, she's plotting out each fucking scene. It's guaranteed to be terrible. You have to write organically. Meaning, let's say you wanted to turn this screenplay of yours into a novel. So you're going to plot out the major points or whatnot. But going back to what I said about what John Huston said, you've got a number of good scenes. Now you have to write the bridge moments. If you ever watch in films, or if you ever watch soap operas or whatnot, everything that gets nominated for an Oscar or an Emmy award, it's these tear-jerking scenes. Someone's dying in the bed. Oh, mom, make it. You ask any actor, and I've interviewed 36 or more actors so far, they'll tell you that's the easy stuff. That's the bread and butter. Yeah. Any actor can tear up and do the
they say comedy's the hardest. A lot of actors say
some people say, but the scenes where you get to see where an actor is really good are those bridge scenes. After the mother has died in the hospital, the man or the woman goes to a bar and they see someone and sitting next to them, and they might say something profound or something. Those are the scenes that are really the scenes that make or break an actor. And that's the kind of thing that in art too. Ultimately, art is about communicating, but you want to communicate something of depth about the reality of the universe. You use fiction, whether it's in poetry, whether it's in drama, whether it's in short stories, novels, whatever. You use fiction to get to the undergirding reality. Not truth, because everyone can have their own truth. It's true when people say that. If I'm out on a date with a girl and it goes badly, she'll say he was an asshole. I'll say she was a twat, and we might both be right. I was an asshole and she's a twat. But the undergirding reality is what you want to get to. What is this thing that we are all participating in? This thing that exists at a certain level. Life or existence is a joke. It's a very Kurt Vonnegut like thing. So where do we get to the core of who we are and what we are and whatnot? I would say that you get that through art. You're not going to get that through philosophy. Philosophy is just ideas. Art, though, is ideas in motion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Vonnegut's a great example of that. I think so. When you talk about diversity in art, and I want to know what you think about someone like John Steinbeck, who is definitely a good writer. In my opinion, one of the better American writers. But would you say he lacks in diversity?
Well, I mean, he did silly things like, I won't say silly, but lesser things like Travels with Charlie.
Yeah, I feel like
hold on.
Like the films he wrote.
Hold on, my wife is at the door.
Oh, okay.
Come on in.
Are you recording?
Yes, you can be a
Tell her
guest.
to come in.
You can be a guest star.
Hi.
This is my wife.
Hello.
Guest starring Jessica Schneider in an intrusive moment.
I'll start reading her books soon. I'll start reading her stuff. What's the first thing I need to read?
Oh, well, that's a hard question.
Yeah, it is.
I have to think about that. Because there's a lot of them that aren't published. So.
Okay, well, that's fine. You think
that.
of it. You tell him he can email it to me, I guess. And
Yeah. I just hear
that.
you from the other side of the house screaming. I mean, what are you screaming about?
We're talking.
You talking about Bruce?
I've mentioned Bruce.
Oh, good.
This is what it's like being married.
What?
Oh yeah. See, I've never been married, but I have a girlfriend, and we don't live together. Oh, yeah.
This is a kitten, Ozzy, the 7-month-old kitten.
Beautiful.
Okay, take him out.
Okay.
Shut
All
the
right.
door.
I love it. I got a dog. I'm a dog guy, but I love cats too. So yeah, Steinbeck. Yeah, he did some silly things, but I feel like even some of the films he wrote, they're not as great as his novels.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I feel like his novels, his best ones, are similar.
Well, first off, as far as film is a cooperative art.
Yeah.
When you're a writer, you're God. I can destroy galaxies. If I want to. I can do whatever I want. There. That's different when you're doing a drama. I've written 100 plays, exactly 100. So far. The next one, once I finish this book, is going to do sort of a comedy of manners about Catherine the Great. But Steinbeck, yeah, I mean, if you look at East of Eden, is a great pulpy soap opera. The one with Sharon, what is it? The Grapes of Wrath with Rose of Sharon. That's a great one. Where that last scene. Speaking of great ending scenes, where she feeds the bum from her tit. Then Of Mice and Men is a great short
Great
work.
ending.
Now Steinbeck is better than Hemingway. Steinbeck is better than Fitzgerald. He's better than Faulkner. When I think of Hemingway, the only thing I can say that was unequivocally great of his was Old Man in the Sea, and that's a novella.
Wow, it's amazing to hear someone say that because I kind of agree. I do like Hemingway. I got most of his novels, but The Old Man in the Sea is the only one I ever read more than once.
Yeah, well, his short stories, he had the ability to do more. Just reading him, he was a very lazy writer, and this is.
I like Letter to His Son. I like that poem.
This is one of the things I talk about people with writing. You have to enjoy making art. Why are you doing it if you're not? You look at so much art today. I
think he was drunk when he made most of his art.
Yes, but look at a lot of politically correct writers. They'll be, they're at some poetry reading, and they'll be like, "When my father touched my pussy, my world fell, but I strove through the fires of Hades, and I conquered."
So okay, so so I don't know how I don't know if you watch a lot of new films, but like I go to the movies. I love movies.
Uh-huh.
That's probably my primary passion as far as the arts go. So I go watch new films all the time, and you know the film studio A24. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, but
So they're like kind of the most popular quote unquote independent. They're not even independent anymore. Film studio, but they've made all these movies, and so many of them or that they produce so many of these movies and there are so many like these horror films about trauma and about parental issues and it's just the same themes in these movies over and over. I went and saw one 3 days ago, this new one called Love's Lies Bleeding, and it was so bad. And it was the whole movie was just about this girl who is in a crime family who has a bad dad. She's a lesbian. She falls in love with this lesbian bodybuilder. She starts giving her steroids. They figure out how bad the dad is. I'm going to spoil it because you're probably never going to watch it. But at the end of the movie, the bodybuilder girl has taken so much steroids that she grows into a giant. She grows into a giant and holds the dad and kills the dad while she's a giant, while the daughter sits there and watches, and then they drive off into the fucking sunset.
I mean, my wife was telling me about a movie called
This film's getting great reviews. Great reviews, by the way. People think this is a good
My
film.
wife was telling me about this thing called American Fiction, which is about a black a white writer or a black writer that dumbs herself down to appeal to white audiences. Apropos of what you were saying about this movie, it reminded me of what I call ideational failures. There was a fellow, I think it might have been Ta-Nehisi Coates or another black writer, a few years back won the Pulitzer Prize for a novel about what if the Underground Railroad was really a subway, you know? And it's like, this is literally the level of idea. And I read through the book 5 or 6 years ago, and when Jessica and I went to a Barnes and Noble, so I was just sitting there reading the book. It took me, if I recall, it's not that long of a book, under 200 pages. I read it in like 45, 50 minutes. It was ridiculously bad. But this is and so it's not only that people lack skill, they don't have any ideas anymore. This is one of the reasons, for example, I've told people they need to put a moratorium on Shakespeare because for 50 years, never produced another Shakespeare play for 50 years or so, because that's what people go to. It's either some new PC shit or it's back to Shakespeare, and everything else in the middle that could be done is not done. And like I said, this is bad ideation. You know, if you don't have a good idea, no amount of skill is going to make what you're doing any good.
I read this horrible book recently. It was called Only Americans Burn in Hell. It was written in 2019, and I don't know why I even ordered it. It just showed up on my doorstep. I must have been drunk one night and just bought it on Amazon because I saw somebody say to read it. But I come in and it turns out to be like this book where this I don't know whether she's a lesbian or I don't even know what she is. She's this superhero, and it's she moves off to an island where there's no men, and they kill all the men. And halfway through the book, the writer takes this diatribe about how his book is not about the Me Too movement because he started writing this book before the Me Too movement. Mm. He literally includes this in the novel. And it's just like, I remember I threw it away. It made me so mad that this is something that was published and praised. And that's one of the things I like about the Vincetti brothers is the way you start it. You know, I guess you're quoting, well, I don't even know what book it is. I think
it starts with Paulie Maravelli was dead.
Well, no. Before that, there's the artist's statement by Manny Cole. Where you like show some dribble of like contemporary.
Well, yeah, that was about 10, 12 years ago. My wife knew this guy who had this bad press in England, and I called it Moo Moo Press in my book. Yeah, so I just basically made fun of his whole crap.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious. I honestly, I had to read that 3 or 4 times before I even read Paul Mary Valley was dead, just because I thought that was
Oh, and by the way,
it's timeless. It's
yeah,
timeless is what's so good about it.
yeah. By the way, um, it should be noted that if this is going to run soon, I am not Fat Dan Schneider from Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm because I the last week or so, the Nickelodeon thing, he had this
Yeah, I
terrible
know.
thing where he was accused of being an asshole
I
boy.
know.
I have nothing. I would get 7 8 years ago people saying you raped Britney Spears' sister. You know, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because apparently this fat Dan Schneider was supposedly, molesting Britney Spears'
He
sister.
made all these shows that I watched when I was growing up as a
Yeah.
kid. Like they were like,
No
the
relation.
the kid.
I'm
Yeah.
older, I'm thinner, and I'm poorer.
There we go. I thought I was
And
gonna
I
mention
have
about
real
that.
talent
I might wait to publish it just because everybody's talking
and
about that right now.
accomplishment.
But I didn't want to offend you about that. But since you brought it up, yeah, I'll probably wait to fucking publish it
Yes.
because.
Older, thinner, poorer, and actual accomplishment.
Okay, okay. I need to write that down. That because that's that's hilarious. That you older,
You know,
thinner,
and,
poorer, and actual
and I'll tell
accomplishment.
you, when I was a kid growing up in the late '60s, early '70s, there was probably an apocryphal story. But Adolf Hitler had some relatives that lived in the New York area, and so there was this guy supposedly out on Long Island. And again, it's probably an apocryphal story, who ran a bakery, and he ran it for 20 some years from the mid from World War I until the mid 30s or something. And then he had to give it up because apparently his name was Adolf Hitler, and people stopped going to his bakery because of that asshole in Germany. So
Oh my
so
God.
whenever people mention the Fat Dan Schneider,
Yeah,
I think of the Adolf Hitler the baker, whether he
yeah.
existed or not.
So do you know the congressman from Florida? He's one of the worst. That Matt Gates.
I've heard the name again, but
He's horrible.
yeah,
But there's this I guess reporter named Matt Gertz
oh
that
yeah,
anytime Matt Gates says something
yeah,
stupid, Matt Gertz just retweets all the people coming at him with just like and saying you're
yeah.
a sexist pedophile. It's funny stuff.